Zimbabwe, once brimming with economic promise, began its descent into turmoil in the late 1990s. Policy missteps and external pressures sowed the seeds of decline. Unbudgeted payouts, military intervention and land reforms strained the economy. Declining agriculture and rising inflation created a perfect storm. Printing more money led to hyperinflation. Land reforms were particularly damaging. Seizures often involved violence and intimidation. Poor planning led to a decline in agricultural production. Zimbabwe became reliant on food imports. The government's response was denial and reluctance to reform. Price controls led to shortages and a black market. Printing more money worsened inflation. Political repression deepened as the crisis worsened. Opposition voices were silenced, eroding investor confidence. Reckless spending and ill-conceived policies created a vicious cycle. By the turn of the millennium, Zimbabwe's economy was in freefall. Inflation spiraled out of control and basic goods became scarce. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic hyperinflationary episodes in modern history. The period between 2007 and 2008 marked the peak of Zimbabwe's hyperinflationary crisis, a time of unprecedented economic turmoil. Inflation reached an estimated peak of 89.7 sextillion%. The Zimbabwean dollar became virtually worthless. Citizens carried shopping bags full of money for basic necessities. The government's response was a mix of desperation and denial. The central bank printed larger denominations, culminating in the $100 trillion note. This note barely bought a loaf of bread. President Mugabe blamed external forces rather than acknowledging the government's role. The social and economic consequences were devastating. Savings were wiped out and pensions became worthless. Hospitals and schools struggled as salaries became meaningless. Malnutrition and disease became widespread. Zimbabwe became a cautionary tale of economic mismanagement. In 2009, the government abandoned its currency. A multi-currency system was adopted, bringing some stability. The crisis highlighted the loss of confidence in the government's ability to manage the economy. The hyperinflationary period left an indelible scar on Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe introduced the ZiG on April 5, 2024, symbolizing a fresh start. Backed by gold and reserves, it aimed to restore confidence. The government promoted it as a symbol of renewal. Initial response was cautiously optimistic. However, distrust and economic challenges persisted. The ZiG faced an uphill battle for acceptance. The hopes pinned on the ZiG as a harbinger of economic stability quickly unraveled as Zimbabwe plunged back into the familiar throes of inflation. By August 2024, just 4 months after its introduction, the ZiG had begun a rapid devaluation, mirroring the fate of its predecessor, the Zimbabwean dollar. The official exchange rate, desperately defended by the government, became increasingly detached from the black market reality. As the ZiG plummeted, inflation surged with a vengeance. From 600% in September 2024, it skyrocketed to 1,200% by October, erasing any gains made in the immediate aftermath of the ZiG's launch. The economic landscape once again became characterized by soaring prices, shortages of basic goods, and a pervasive sense of uncertainty. The ghost of hyperinflation, thought to be vanquished, returned to haunt the nation. The social and economic consequences of this renewed inflationary spiral were dire. Salaries, once again rendered meaningless by the rapidly eroding purchasing power of the ZiG, failed to keep pace with the rising cost of living. The already struggling healthcare and education systems faced further strain as teachers, doctors and nurses found themselves unable to afford basic necessities. The cycle of poverty deepened, and the most vulnerable segments of society bore the brunt of the economic crisis. As of mid-2025, Zimbabwe's economic future remains shrouded in uncertainty. The ZiG, once touted as a symbol of national renewal, has become yet another casualty of the country's deep-rooted economic and political challenges. The government's response, a mix of price controls, monetary policy adjustments, and desperate attempts to defend the official exchange rate, has proven largely ineffective in stemming the tide of inflation. The international community, while expressing concern, remains wary of providing substantial assistance without concrete evidence of political and economic reforms. Zimbabwe's economic saga, a tale of unfulfilled potential and recurring crises, continues. leaving its citizens trapped in a cycle of uncertainty and hardship. The path to genuine and sustainable economic recovery remains elusive, requiring a fundamental shift in policies, a restoration of trust in institutions, and a commitment to addressing the root causes of the nation's economic woes. Until then, the spectre of inflation and the legacy of economic mismanagement will continue to cast a long shadow over Zimbabwe's future.